Hello, and welcome to the Gameplay Cast review for the 14th book in the Warhammer Horus Heresy series, The First Heretic. The First Heretic, written by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, tells the story of how Lorgar and the Word-Bearers fell to chaos, leading them to sow the seeds of the Horus Heresy. This book is mostly a prequel, starting 50 years prior to the events of the Heresy, at the point where the Ultramarines and the Emperor chastised the Word-Bearers by wiping out the city of Monarchia. The Word-Bearers considered this the perfect city, devoted to worship of the Emperor, a crime in the 30k Imperium. The entire Legion is made to kneel in the ashes of the city and rebuked by the Emperor himself. Following this humiliation, Lorgar and his Legion begin the search to find gods worthy of their worship. The blurb from the book reads as follows. Amidst the galaxy-wide war of the Great Crusade, the Emperor castigates the Word-Bearers for their worship. Distraught at this judgment, Lorgar and his Legion seek another path, while devastating world after world, venting their fury and fervour on the battlefield. Their search for a new purpose leads them to the edge of the material universe, where they meet ancient forces far more powerful than they could have imagined. Having set out to illuminate the Imperium, the corruption of chaos takes hold, and their path to damnation begins. Unbeknownst to the Word-Bearers, their quest for truth contains the very roots of heresy. It definitely helps to have a knowledge base of Warhammer 30k or to have read some of the preceding novels, but since most of this book is focused purely on the Word-Bearers and the Serrated Suns captain, Argal Tal, it can be read as a standalone, though you would get some of the characters and lore. Equally, it doesn't push the story further than Isstvan 5, hence those seeking the direct path could give this one a miss, though it does give a preview of the events leading up to the Heresy, as well as some interesting insight into the Word-Bearers and Lorgar. Time for the inevitable question then. Is it worthwhile? Now I'll be the first to admit my bias. I hate the Word-Bearers Legion and their Primarch Lorgar. That said, I actually really enjoyed this book, and against all my loyalist inclinations, I found myself wanting to recommend it. And here's why. Firstly, don't worry, I'll keep spoilers to the end of the video, so the review will be spoiler free until the very end, where you can stop watching if needed. I think what I like best about this book is the way the Legion's descent into chaos is handled. Unlike the earlier books detailing Horus's fall, which in my opinion rushed through this, so much so that Horus practically turns overnight, and with some pretty flimsy reasoning. This book, however, handles it a lot better. Firstly, it paints Lorgar as having a more artistic soul, and someone who didn't want to be a general. He would have been happier dealing in philosophy and debate than marshalling armies. This sets him apart from most of his brothers. Worse than this is that many of his brothers view him as weak due to his reticence at being a warrior. This is great as it singles him out as being apart and alone amongst his brothers outside of Magnus. Secondly, the way him and the Legion are punished and humiliated by the Emperor really works for me. It's implied that the Emperor initially intended to purge the Legion in its entirety, and that he was talked round by the Sigillite and the other Primarchs. My big worry going into this was the logic as to why the Emperor did what he did, and that it would be a bit flimsy and weak. Instead, I think we get a pretty decent picture that makes sense. In the Emperor's mind, he was teaching a valuable lesson, and actually showing restraint. To Lorgar, it destroyed his faith in the Emperor completely, and the bad influences in the form of Corferon, and everyone's favourite, Erebus, move in to take advantage of it. The other thing that's great is getting insight into the Word-Bearers through the Astartes character, Argal Tal. He fulfills the classic honourable warrior role, and despite his fall to chaos, he still has principles and tries to act with honour. His internal conflict is interesting, as are his interactions with the custodians that accompany the Word-Bearers, not to mention the changes that he undergoes as a result of accompanying Lorgar on his pilgrimage. To be totally honest, I don't have a huge number of complaints from reading this book. The worst thing is probably the fact that the truth that Chaos uses to convert the Word-Bearers is similar to the truth that persuades Horus. It's similar in the sense that it's pretty weak, and no one seems to ask questions like, are we being lied to? How can we trust a literal demon? You know, sensible questions like this. It's not a deal breaker, I just think we could have had more depth and more conflict here. For example, it's said that some of the Word-Bearers didn't embrace the new faith and were quietly gotten rid of. However, none of this betrayal or conflict is present, and despite Argal Tal being uncomfortable, I don't feel he ever really wavers from this set path. Instead, he's presented as being unshakably loyal to Lorgar. I suppose what I'm saying is, Yes, the Legion was humiliated by the Emperor, but surely a contingent of the Legion would actually seek to become better agents of the Imperial truth, and in so doing regain the Emperor's favour? It might have been cool to see some of the loyal word bearers in action, particularly if they crossed paths with the Serrated Sons, since I don't think the word bearers were at the Loyalist Purge on Istvan III. Equally, I get that the Blessed Lady character is special to Argyle Tal and that she plays a role of sorts for the Legion, but I feel that this hook, as I believe the book starts with her voice narrating, doesn't really lead to anything, or I found it pretty disappointing anyway. I'll build on this a touch in the spoiler section at the end. The only other thing I think is a bit of a downer is the timeline of the book. The first part of the novel is set 50 years before the heresy, the second part is set just before it, and then the third part is at the start of the insurrection with the Dropsite Massacre. This passage of time is a little bit choppy, particularly in the third act, and though at times characters explain the situation, it left me wondering what's been going on, where is this character, why are they doing that, etc. It's not necessarily the passage of time that's the problem, it's more that I feel the start of each section doesn't ease you in with a summary or setting the scene, it just kind of throws you in, and the third part seemed a lot more rushed than the other two.
Heresy grows from idleness.
What we have here then is a pretty good book detailing the key event that triggered the Horus Heresy, and despite my pre-existing hate of the word bearers, I found myself enjoying the book. The main characters like Argyle Tal, Aquilon, and hell, even Lorgar to an extent stand out and kept my attention. As I mentioned previously, the work done to explain the fall to Chaos was pretty logical and well presented, in spite of the lack of cross-examination from the protagonists. The negatives don't ruin the overall story, and again, despite Argyle Tal being a traitorous heretic, I still liked him by the end of the book. In some ways, too, I almost feel sorry for Lorgar. Almost. I'm still rooting for the good guys, but fleshing out the word bearers was pretty interesting, and the author makes the very wise move to minimise Erebus, which is only a good thing, in this man's opinion. If Erebus was the main character, I don't think I'd have coped. God, I hate that guy. Anyway, in terms of a score, I feel this book is solid and worthy of an 8 out of 10 rating. Argyle Tal's journey is captivating, and his internal conflict and evolution gives a great insight into the captain and his legion. I do think that the hook with the Blessed Lady turns into a flop, and at the end there could have and probably should have been more internal conflict with Argyle Tal and the Wordbearers Legion. Overall though, the book was good, and even though I stated you could skip it, since it doesn't really progress the heresy, I would actually recommend giving this book a go, because I did enjoy the read. Right, now let's get into spoilers. First up, and biggest on my list, is the fight between Argyle Tal and Aquilon of the Custodians. I love how the Custodian who had taken the vow of silence finishes it to laugh at the demonic Gal Vorbak and insta-kill Zephyr, followed by saying, "I always hated you, Zephyr." That was cool as hell. There is a big but here though. But this fight is so underdone. Argyle Tal and Aquilon had a mutual respect for each other, and I really feel like the two of them needed to have a duel of the fates, a one-on-one showdown where either Argyle Tal kills Aquilon or he lets him go. Personally, I think it would have been a better ending to have the three Custodians at the end escape, rather than being killed off, and killed off in a very unsatisfying way. Literally, Argyle Tal just rips Aquilon's head off after he kills one of the Gal Vorbak. I can't help but ask why we bothered with all the dueling segments if we're just going to kill Aquilon in a few seconds. I think ultimately he should have controlled the demon within and fought Aquilon as a man. Moreover, the Blessed Lady hook is a massive flop in my eyes, as I mentioned previously, as she just gets killed by Aquilon for being the Legion's confessor. She herself never really seems to be corrupted by the knowledge of what's happening to the Wordbearers, and her last words to Argyle Tal, "What have they done to you?" doesn't seem to resonate with him or in fact have any real impact. I was waiting for the point where she becomes some kind of chaos monstrosity or realises that the Legion is lost and remains faithful to the Emperor, or just some twist that was worthwhile. I could say the same about the robot in Cardadine, which is another missed opportunity. I was waiting for it to turn on the Tech Priest or become some kind of demon-possessed creature, and nothing happens, other than it getting nailed by the Custodians. All in all, I think these highlighted issues add to that feeling that the final act is pretty rushed, and could have done with a bit more room to breathe. Obviously no book picks up every thread, but I feel a few of these were missteps that detracted from the final article. If you want to check out The First Heretic following this review, it's available from the Warhammer website and in audiobook form from Audible. This concludes the Game Player Cast's review for the 14th book in the Warhammer Horus Heresy series, The First Heretic.